want to welcome everyone who's watching our webinar and joining our webinar live, and also to audiences who are now watching our recorded version. So at the beginning, we want to announce the next webinar session, which is taking place in 2 weeks' time on June the 12th, Friday, where we will be focusing on community-based programs, especially how they deal with the COVID-19 situation and all the challenges. So we are now currently curating this webinar series every 2 weeks. So you can follow our webinar on our website later. So we will be recording this webinar, as we said, so that people will be able to join and watch the recording if they missed this. So now we will play a very short 1-minute video to introduce why we're doing this and what is this webinar series. We host meetups to connect creative and innovative practitioners to share their creative designs, expressions, and practices. Since 2018, we have hosted 6 meetups during which we explored the future of creative learning, talked about modern curriculum design of traditional Chinese music, and even put together a storytelling concert featuring the music, lyrics, and script created by children. We invited case presenters to share experiences around creative learning in Chinese rural communities, and children and parents to share creative learning at home, and educators and designers to discuss design thinking in and beyond higher education.
Hi, I'm Ruthmann, a professor at NYU Shanghai in the program on creativity and innovation.
Hi, I'm Yanyue. I'm assistant professor at program on creativity and innovation at NYU Shanghai.
Together, we founded and currently lead the CXZ Lab, or Creative Experience Design Lab.
We are inviting you to our Creative Meetup webinar series on creative teaching and learning online.
Welcome.
Welcome. Okay. So, as I said, please follow our updates on this link, and you'll see all our past webinars and our upcoming webinar series. So we want to introduce what will happen today is after our short introduction, we have 3 presenters. Can everyone see my screen? It says my screen share is paused. Alex, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't know why it says my screen share is paused. Okay, that's cool. So what will happen today is we are very delighted to have 3 presenters who are currently undergraduate and graduate students, and actually 2 students. I want to send congratulations to them again, who just graduated yesterday during the first ever online graduation ceremony or commencement ceremony, Maudie and Tim. And we also have among our panelists, Lulu, who is a former colleague, which we really love to work with at PCI. So Lulu is now doing her master's study in adult learning and leadership at Columbia University, and she also held a bachelor's degree at NYU. So we have a very NYU community, but we also welcome you to join our discussion after their talk. So they will each give us a 10-minute short talk, and this is followed by a discussion, and you can send any questions you have while listening to their talk by using the Q&A function or just type in the chat box. So very quickly, before we begin, these are some of the past webinars we hosted, focusing on different themes. So for example, creative learning online in K-12 in China, as well as internationally. We also had a first webinar focusing on creative learning online in the higher ed context. So if you are interested in presenting or recommending any speakers to present at this webinar series, focusing on creative learning online, especially how to deal with the current challenges in different contexts across lifespan, please get in touch with me or Alex. I will be delighted to host and arrange a webinar. So you can see our previous webinar recordings by scanning the link and also by clicking the links shared here on our website. So without further ado, I will pass the screen share to our first presenter, Maudie Carey, who just graduated, as I said, yesterday, and she is a senior student from NYU Shanghai, originally studying in social sciences with a focus on psychology. And she will be sharing how she used poetry to hone her language skills during this very challenging time. So Maudie, it's your turn.
Thank you, Yanyue. I'll begin sharing the screen. So as Yanyue said, I'll be sharing about my experience using poetry to hone my Chinese skills during this rather unique time that we're living in, to put it mildly. So I'll just want to start out by saying briefly my own experience with this pandemic and where I have been, from which places I've been participating in this new kind of learning. So I was on a leave last semester and I was at home in New York. So I was really eagerly awaiting the chance to come back to Shanghai for the spring semester. And it goes without saying that that didn't go as planned at first. After about a month and a half of flights getting canceled and delayed, I decided to come back to Shanghai on March 23rd. I had an overnight layover of 22 hours in the Tokyo Narita airport, where I realized one of the silver linings of distance learning is that even sitting in a dark airport lounge at 3 in the morning, I could still watch asynchronous lectures and submit homework. After that, once I got to Shanghai, I did 14 days of isolated quarantine in a hotel. And I realized again that the nice thing about synchronous classes is that even in a hotel where I legally was not allowed to have contact with anybody else in person, I could still join my classmates every week. And my professors would kindly check up on me and ask me how the experience was. And now, where I sit now is with the host family I'm living with in Tangqiao and Pudong. And I've continued to adjust to the online learning here, especially when I first arrived, since I had gotten used to a New York Times schedule for my classes and then had to flip everything by 12 hours. So why poetry for me? I took a post-advanced Chinese class this semester called Discovering Contemporary China Through Documentary Film. And when we got to Unit 4, our unit was Liu Dong Renkou, floating population, but our teacher, Bilaoshe, took a rather unique approach, and she used the lens of migrant worker poetry to examine and learn about the lives of migrant workers in China. And at the very beginning of the unit, she mentioned to us somewhat in passing that our unit project at the end of the unit would be to write a poem in Chinese. And this was kind of daunting at first because I don't write poetry often. And when I try to write poetry in English, I usually I get in my own way and I spend so much time, trying to think what's the perfect word to write that I just end up not writing anything. But nevertheless, this kind of planted the seed and got me thinking about writing poetry in Chinese. And sooner or later, I was going to have to do it as an assignment. Our first assignment in this unit was to translate a poem by a migrant worker into English as a way to kind of dip our toes, so to speak, in the water. So I was really moved by the poem that I translated, as well as the poems that my classmates translated. And I realized that, you could write a poem and never directly touch on exactly the topic that you were trying to say, and yet you could really communicate your meaning, which is something that I knew about poetry in English, but just in the context of Chinese, I had never really considered. So one day I had something on my mind. It was really weighing on me, and I got back to the apartment and I thought, why don't I write a poem about it in Chinese? I have to do it sooner or later, even though I've got a couple weeks until the deadline. Maybe this could be a means of catharsis. So I sat down, I wrote it, and the words just kind of flowed. And I was pretty surprised by that because, as I said, when I try to write poetry in English, I really tend to get in my own way. But somehow switching to my non-native language of Chinese seemed to make things click. So then began the editing process. So I sent a WeChat message to my teacher, Bilaosha, and I told her that I had just written my poem. And she said, well, why don't you share it with me? So she offered to take a look at it, and we used Google Docs. And as you can see here, she made some suggestions for word usage and structure. And at the same time, she also gave me the feeling like I had written something halfway decent and, you know, maybe should try my hand even more at writing poems. So more poems, yes, more poems. So I kept writing poems to the point that I actually would procrastinate other assignments that were actually due within maybe 12 hours. And I would say, no, I'll just write one more poem. I'll just write one more poem. And I really started to enjoy it. And anytime I wrote a poem, I would tell Bilaosha, and she would always welcome me to share it with her. And she would help me workshop some poems on Google Docs. And I remember there were a few that I was quite reluctant to share because I thought they weren't that good. I thought they were more like a stream of consciousness. But Bilaosha really helped me feel like it was okay to not write a perfect poem. And that really helped me set the perfectionism aside and just write and know that in any case, even if it started out as, you know, not so great, she would help me workshop it to be something meaningful and what I intended it to be. So the first poem I wrote was okay. It was well written, I suppose, in a technical sense of grammar and word usage, but it was very direct. And one day I had an office hour with Bilaosha where she brought some other Chinese poems for me to read and for us to look at together. And from reading those, I realized I got some inspiration for how I could use metaphors and poetry to express what I wanted to say in Chinese without actually ever bringing up the thing directly. So I wrote a poem about a person in my life who, simply put, I formerly had a great relationship with and then now feel somewhat estranged from. And at the beginning of the poem, as you see here, I intentionally had a few stanzas that were really directly addressing the person and kind of really explicitly said what it was about. And after I sat down with Bilaosha, I realized that actually I could just totally cut the first two stanzas of the poem. And in the process, it made the poem, I think, more accessible to other people in the sense that it was more generalizable. In the beginning, I addressed the person by name and said who I was talking about. So it was very clear it was a poem for me about something in my life. And then after cutting that first part and after changing the title, I realized, you know, writing this poetry maybe could be not just for me, but also to share with others. So how did this help with language skills? So, I mean, the obvious part is the word usage and the grammar, the technical stuff. So when I worked with Bilaosha, she would provide me, you know, really pointed feedback and clarify things. One of the things I think I ran into the most, especially with poems, is that, you know, just like in English, we have words where there's a lot of ways to express one thing, and which word you use really depends on the context and the nuance. So in workshopping these poems, I really got to dive deeper into language and get a better understanding of some vocabulary. And I've studied other languages before, and I took Spanish up to a college level, but I never got a chance to write a poem in Spanish. And in retrospect, I think that really made a difference in the level that I reached in that language, because in writing poetry in Chinese, I found I expanded my lexicon to be able to talk about not just things that you learn in a textbook, like have you eaten and what are you doing this afternoon, but things that were really personal to me. And that before writing poems, I found that my Chinese vocabulary was limited in that regard. I did not, you know, I would be talking fluently and then want to say something really personal or something about, you know, my own life and realize I didn't have the language to do so. And now I think because of poetry, I do. And that's the thing I think about writing poetry, especially in a time like this, is that it's a way to express yourself and achieve some kind of catharsis while actually still being productive. And, you know, in the end, sometimes making a product that you can even share with others. I mean, I've definitely written some poems that are more like word vomit, and they're for me. They're just for me to get something off my chest. But others I've shared with people, and I feel like actually I'm able to access some ideas and thoughts more clearly and more lucidly when I'm writing in Chinese than when I'm trying to approach them in English. And that's why I call it productive catharsis, because I think that you can really make and accomplish something while also attending to those emotional needs. And especially during this time, it's a valuable practice, because for most things, we have to put our feelings in a box on a shelf and sit down and get the work done and then go open that box later. But with poetry, it's quite the opposite. You have to take the box and put it right next to you and open it up in order to be able to write a poem. So I'll just leave you with this poem, which now is kind of like a souvenir for me of the whole process. I look at it and I don't just read the poem, but I think of, you know, all the work that came before it and how valuable it's been as an experience to me. As I mentioned earlier, this was the poem that had all the exposition at the beginning that I just cut. And then after looking at it several times, after having Bilash's help in workshopping it, it became something that I was fairly happy with. So yes, that's my story about using poetry, and thank you all so much for listening.
That's wonderful, Maudie. Do you actually mind reading that poem, or would you?
Oh, yeah, sure, I'll read it.
That'd be great.
Yeah, 1 second. Okay. 反正感觉像是在刹那一切都改变了，把我生活分为以前和以后。我常常为以前的你举办家乡的葬礼，歌颂我曾经最好的朋友，也常常为后来的你制作家乡的无毒吧，列举你所害我的方法。
Thank you, Maudie.
Thanks.
That was very beautiful, and I can really echo when you said that when you are really into writing poems, you kind of want to push all the other deadlines. And that's really something you actively want to do, and that it's good to hear that it's also catharsis. It gives you this productive kind of feeling during this very challenging time. And I know it's very hard to write poems in a second language. So it's great to hear that you get all the encouragement and all the feedback you get from Bilash, who is actually also listening right now. So we'll come back to hear any questions or any other feedback that the audience have while listening to this poem. And next, moving from poem, we will also hear from Lulu what kind of creative things she has been doing during this time while she is now in New York and doing her MA, as I said, in adult learning and leadership. So I just want to quickly add that at NYU Shanghai, our two speakers today, Maudie and Tim, started online learning throughout this spring semester. From February all the way to a few weeks ago in May. And Lulu studying in Columbia University in New York, she told me they moved to online mode after the spring break. That'll be in late March-ish. So I'll now pass the screen share to Lulu to tell us how she is doing to try to turn herself into a lifelong learner.
Hey everyone, I'm going to share my screen. Is that good?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm Lulu, and I am currently involved in Adult Learning and Leadership Master Program at the Department of Organization and Leadership in Teachers College, Columbia University. And in this webinar, I am going to share my understanding of what it means to be a lifelong learner as a master student. I will be sharing the learning style and philosophy of education, which will help you come up with your learning goals and strategies for learning objectives examination, and lastly, becoming aware of the learning context given the pandemic time. So before we start the journey, it is vital to know that we are learning on ourselves, for ourselves, and by ourselves. Thus, the most important question for us to think about is, who am I, where am I at, what I want, and what is the purpose of learning? If you do not have the answer immediately, that is perfectly fine, because here we have two tools that will help you to understand more about yourself. So the first tool that we can use to know about ourselves is the philosophy of adult education inventory. So by having this test, you will be able to figure out your dominant learning philosophy, purpose, and preferred methods. So for example, scoring highest at humanistic and second high at progressive, I got to know that as a learner, my learning purpose is to facilitate self-actualization, gain problem-solving skills, and reform society, etc. And as a self-directed, interest-driven learner, I love to learn in a context which which are experiential, interactive, authentic, and open, and problem-solving and project-based learning are highly likely to be the learning methods at my favor. And the other tool that you can use is Cope's learning style. So according to Cope, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. So Cope's experiential learning style theory is typically represented by 4-stage learning cycles, as you can see here. There are concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. So although this is a typical cycle, there is an inclination that a person would score higher at certain stages. So his or her learning style would fall into one of the listed 9 categories. For example, my testing result actually fall into the initiating, which indicate that my most preferred and effective learning is through initiating action and dealing with experiences and situations. And I think this result actually pretty much align with the result of my learning philosophy. So here comes my own learning goal, which is develop and live an authentic and sustainable life. Meaning that as an individual, I would like to achieve the 8 dimensions of wellness, including emotional, social, spiritual, intellectual, etc., as shown here. Also, as a human being associated with a collective community, I would love to know how can we establish a healthy relationship with the surrounding environment. And I believe creative expression is the way that I can achieve this goal. So following the learning goal, I am able to come up with the learning strategies as a lifelong learner. So for me, aiming for developing and living an authentic and sustainable life through creative expression, my learning strategies are first participate in learning experiences that related to 8 dimensions of wellness and human ecology. And those learning experiences probably would support creative expression. And then I would document the learning and creating process. And then I would produce the creative expression and reflect on the creative genesis, learning and creating process, and maybe generate concept map. And then I would share the creative process and expression for constructive feedback, just like I am doing right now. And then I would iterate the creative expression and concept map. And this is an ongoing process. So now I am demonstrating how I aligned my learning goal and strategies with 2 of the courses that I took in the past semester at Teachers College. The instructional design of attack just by looking at the learning objectives here. It's a relatively practical course which requires learners to be familiar with mechanics, techniques, and frameworks of the learning design process. Besides the weekly reading reaction that guides learners to reflect on the theories, the group design project provided a project-based learning opportunities for learners going over the instructional design process step by step. Having the freedom to choose my own interested design theme, I decided to design a digital learning game on climate change and sustainability. And by designing this learning game, which I viewed as a form of creative expression, I was able to explore the environmental, economical, and social aspect of sustainability from a more systemic perspective, which indeed align with the sustainable life part of my personal learning goal. The other course initially caught my attention because of its title, which has authenticity in it. You also can see it explore arts-based approaches, integrating transformative learning theory, authenticity, and individuation into a more holistic approach. And what I love the most of the course is undoubtedly the imaginative project in which we are able to have the freedom to choose from a variety of creative expression to reflect on what you have learned from the class. So I chose to produce a song and music video on transformative learning towards authenticity in the end. And I believe that this course definitely aligned with my own learning goal as well, especially the authenticity part. So this is actually the music video I made, but I think due to the time limit, I'm not going to go over the entire music video, but I will share with you the creating process. So basically, I use Google Slides, the lowest fidelity style to create created the animation of this music video. As you can see, in total there are 456 slides in total, and in this music video, I actually portrayed a little circle's individual and transformative learning trajectory towards authenticity. So basically here, the little circle start interact with the environment and then construct its experience. And then it come out of the computer screen, starting reflecting on its own experiences. And then it become conscious of the transformation towards authenticity. So it realized that, oh, I really want to be a note, musical note. And then it continuously construct experience through creating meaningful interaction with other musical note and then with other instrument and create this musical piece in the end. So as I mentioned that interacting with the environment and meaningful as I mentioned that interacting with the environment and having meaningful interaction here, I would like to share more about the importance of being aware of the learning context and your surroundings. So as we know that there was a major transition of the learning environment due to the coronavirus, all of the in-person meetings were modified into online. And this is a huge change in terms of the learning context. We're not in the traditional class setting anymore. All the classes are delivered via Zoom. For the in-class activity-heavy courses, the transition is extremely challenging. Although it is possible to use the breakout room in Zoom for group discussion. However, the instant communication and feedback, as well as those nonverbal signals, which will help our instructors with formative assessment, are actually restricted. This actually made me rethink of instructors' roles in such a new learning context. Should we define them as expert lecturers of learning materials? Are they facilitator of conversation, or they're other managers of the learning context, or they're our learning partners? But for me, since the professor no longer stand in front of the physical room, the power hierarchy seems dissolved. Sometimes I would just hold my pillow and ukulele, while listening to the online lecture, or sometimes I would just stand up and do some stretch if I sit too long, just because the traditional class setting rules do not apply anymore. And the online context also changed the interaction with our classmates and project teammates. Particularly, I will say, is the communication style. It is just too easy not pressing the unmute button and being unresponsive to your classmates. And too much nonverbal communication is actually missing. But one way that I figured out could be a creative solution for breaking the silence is actually to use an interesting virtual background in Zoom, like I have right now, which would usually initiate a conversation successfully. And lastly, the interaction with the physical surroundings. Learning in a dorm apartment in the city or in a house in an urban area actually provided totally different learning environments for the learners. Also, not only your interior decoration, but also your households, members like roommates, parents, or children, or even pets around you would create various learning vibes, since they are all interactive surroundings that would unconsciously influence your learning environment. So for example, being quarantined in an apartment room in New York City right now, I would reorganize my room every other day and decorate my room with plants so that I can make my brain stay fresh. And sometimes my roommate and I would have a writing boot camp together when we have deadlines to meet. And I also bought a bigger screen because the bigger screen is just like more eye-friendly for this inevitable prolonged screen staring time given the online learning context. So hopefully this sharing is inspired, and thank you. This is all.
Hi, Lulu. Do you want to share part of your video? We would love to see part of that.
All of them, or?
Yeah, we can spare a few minutes.
Okay.
If you can put that into full screen, that would be great. Thank you.
I remember my mama telling me what to do with my future. Long, long ago when I was just a little kid, she said stop sleeping the place. Stop me from everything that I thought was interesting. Why couldn't you listen? But she now hear that there's a tons of music calling me. I will flee, making myself afraid. Should I be suffering? Or should I worry about whatever I don't need? I mean melodies, I give me melodies, hugging me. Cause we were so young, cause we were got us so much time. Cause we were so young, cause we were got us so much time. Just dance and enjoy, seize your life. I will flee, making myself afraid. Should I be bothering? Or should I worry about whatever I don't need? I mean melodies, hugging me, melodies, hugging me. Cause we were still young. What the heck have you been so hesitant? Cause we were still young. Come on, don't be so afraid. Every day is the day you shine your way. able for justification. I am able to choose my own authentic destination in this long journey of transformation to actualization with a brand new and unique. And I will flee, making myself afraid. I am the only me. Why should I worry about whatever I don't need? I'm me. I am empowering. I am embracing me. 'Cause I'm so young. 'Cause we never got so much time. 'Cause we're so young. 'Cause we never got so much time to stand and enjoy seas our life. 'Cause you were still young. Why the hell are you being so hesitant? 'Cause you were still young. Don't wanna come on to be so afraid. Every day is today. Show your way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you shared that because I know we all loved watching that. I know Lulu has always been a very creative person, but I'm not sure whether this quarantine time has added this your creative power, but we'll hear more from you later in our discussion session. And I've seen even before this webinar, you started to reflect metacognitively on your creative process with that circle pulling out of your screen. So that's very lovely. Glad you shared that. Thank you, Lulu. So now we'll move to our third and last panelist, Guangye, also Tim, who is also our senior student who just graduated yesterday. So congratulations again. Tim is double majoring in data science and finance. And from his title, I assume he will also be talking about some of the student input and contribution during online learning. So I'll hand over to you, Tim.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. So today's my topic is Damoku and emoticon. At the first glance, you might think this is really a combination of really catchy words, but I'll explain what I mean with these two words. So if you are familiar with these two screenshots, you probably guessed what two kind of tools that we use during our online semester. So one is VoiceThread, where you can essentially watch the professor's lectures and make comments at any time of the video. And the other one is Zoom, where you can actually give thumbs up and claps during class and express your concerns or compliments to the professor real time. So today I'm going to start with the general pros and cons of online learning and then move on to explain what I mean by the Damoku and emoticon. So before moving into that, I want to first mention that there is actually a lot of hardware challenges during the online learning phase. So on the left, we can see several pictures from the social media in China, where the teachers are overcoming all this kind of physical and hardware challenges in order to make the online classes. But today I'm going to focus more on the conceptual aspect of online learning and what are the main advantage and disadvantage of using this kind of teaching mode. So I guess I will start with the con first, because many people have been discussing what are the limitations of online learning. So first of all, I guess many of us has experienced that during the online teaching phase, many of us experiences asynchronous problem. As Maudie said, we have many students at Yanyue Shanghai who are actually taking the classes from different parts of the world. So I even know one professor need to get up 3 a.m. in the night in order to deliver a class for students across the world. So this asynchronous problem is really playing a huge role in determining how the class will be. And later on, we can see how we can find solutions to this problem and make it actually an advantage for online learning. So the second limitation of online learning is probably the lack of interaction. So we all know that in the traditional classroom, when we have a question for the professor, we can just raise our hands or even just ask any question to interrupt the professor. But in this kind of online teaching mood, it is really hard to directly or express your concerns real time. So this has also been one of the problems. People are reluctant to use online learning, especially the recorded lectures. And we can see that actually we have several ways to work around that using our technology. So the third problems I see with this online teaching method is the difficulty of getting feedbacks. And this, I guess, applies to both the professors and students as well. So for professors, I have many discussions with them during office hour, and one of the most common questions he or she asked me will be, how do you feel about the class? Can you guys understand me? I didn't get any feedbacks or reaction during the class, so I don't even know if you guys are following. But also for our students, it's kind of difficult to get feedbacks because we are kind of hard to get to the physical office hour, talking to the professor face-to-face and explain the problems with a paper and pen. So this kind of feedback loop is blocked from two ways. On the bright side, there are also several advantages of online learning. One of the most important one is the flexibility. So essentially, we can take classes from anywhere, from any place at any time. So this is definitely one of the biggest advantage of online learning. And also, we can actually see that there's tons of tools and gadgets that can help us to learn and also do things that are not possible in the traditional classroom. For example, we have several famous assessment tools here, and we can see that some of them can make the classroom really interactive, almost like a Jeopardy game. And this kind of things can also help us to know how many of us actually know the content. And this is kind of hard to do in the traditional classroom to perform a live test or quiz with the students. So next up, I would like to say that the advantage of online learning is also about using our own contents. So it's kind of a form of active learning. So what do I mean by user-generated contents? So this is really a term for business and marketing, but I'm using it here because during this semester, many of us actually contributed heavily to the class when we are uploading our presentations, making comments on classmates' assignments. All these kind of things is kind of more celebrated in this semester compared to the previous semesters. So not only the professors did a job to put up contents on the web, but students are also working together to create really, really nice materials. Sometimes I think I learned a lot from the student presentations, almost as much as the lectures. So I think this aspect is also very important. So next up, I want to say a few more words about the two tools that we used. One is the VoiceThread. I think this is a really cool tool for classroom setting. Also, originally it is for conference calls and meetings. As you can see here, we can actually use the text comments, leave a voice, or even like make a video like is shown here that you can actually join with the slides. These are all like applied in our classrooms. I've heard students discussing how to use the technology, but I guess the faculty is putting more efforts to learn how we can open up more discussion and using the multimedia in these kind of platforms. So we're not only making our own classes, but we are also making it with our classmates. So I just want to show this video that I took during our group work. This is actually from a few years ago, but I think this reflects what we can feel when we're working together online. You can see the mouses of different collaborators are moving together, and this really gave me a sense of the classroom setting. And this is something that we can't even do in the classroom because we have to have a really large piece of paper and write on it together. But here it's really elegant, just in a Google Doc page, and we can all write on it and brainstorm together. So here I'm coming back to my caption, Damuku. This is a word, actually means this kind of flying comments over the video. It is first popular with the videos in Japanese anime and then in documentary. Usually people use Daimoku to talk about the video, express their opinions, and just share their feelings at that moment. And I feel like when we are using VoiceThread this semester, I also got a sense that it is kind of like a Daimoku where we can choose which point in the video that we want to make a comment, ask a question, or simply say that this explanation works well for me. And seeing that all our classmates is on this screen, leaving comments together, is really giving me the sense of belonging. And this is kind of resonates with the idea of Daimoku in the video setting. And with all kinds of like annotating tools, we can make really funny like illustrations that help us understand the complex concepts. And this has been a really good tool for us to interact with the professor as well when he is leaving all these comments for us to think about. And this is also applied in other universities across China. So even in like K-12 education, people are using Daimoku for students to interact with teachers, so they can answer the teacher's question on screen and just share their opinions on the questions. Another aspect I want to talk about is emoticon. So when we're having this video conferences, one of the kind of limitation is we cannot react real time and give feedback to the lecturer or the speaker. So I really like this function in Zoom where we actually click on the reactions and choose to clap or give a thumb up. And after many really nice student presentations, and especially during today's presentation, I really want to like click a clap after the presentation just to show my appreciation, but also giving the creating a sense of community even in a Zoom setting. And also we can see that it can be used in other settings for students to express their progress or their current understanding of the content. So people have been trying to use this video monitoring system to analyze who is not paying attention, but there's a great data ethics issue, and also it is maybe a challenge on people's privacy. But if we can utilize the tools provided by video conference softwares, using the going slow, faster, raising hands, is all kind of rich functions, we can actually help people to express their opinions real time. And this is really nicely done and help the professor and also students to learn better. So finally, I would like to say that looking back in this semester's learning, initially I found that online learning might be quite boring because there's literally little interaction between professors and students and among students themselves. And it's hard to get feedback, and the lecture sometimes are not even real time. But now after the semester, I'm more confident that we can actually find a creative way to use all those tools to turn those drawbacks into highlights. For example, using this comment system with all the multimedia, we can actually turn an asynchronous lecture into a really lively one by using all those comments and combining the comments from different people across time together so as to create a better learning experience. We can also use these functions to give clap, sum up, to ask professor to go slower. And these are all examples of interactions that are possible in the traditional classroom and sometimes even only in an online setting. So I guess to sum up, I would like just to say that Daimoku and emoticon are really new terms, popular for the younger generation, but they can also be used in online learning setting to help us think about how we can make the online experience better and achieve things that are not possible in the offline setting. End of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I think you mentioned a lot how this all then comes back to the student-centered learning environment we're trying to create online. And going back to what Lulu just said, when we are watching videos online, sometimes we want to play our own musical instrument, do our doodling, or just stand up and stretch. Maybe we can have a little bit of more stickers on Zoom in the future, and also some of the tailored self-created stickers even from students themselves to add to the current ways of interaction. So thank you very much. Now I want to come back here and move on to our discussion session, which Alex and I will facilitate now. So I know all the panelists are just busy talking, so now you can take some time looking at our chat box, where you see a lot of comments, live comments from all our attendees as well. So I want to start by first commenting on this title, Lulu's Sound, because we're so young. I think what strikes me always about online teaching and learning is everything is more open and transparent. So everyone really needs to pay attention to the quality, especially for instructors. So there's nowhere to hide. If you want to give a very boring lecture, I'm sure everyone would fall asleep. So I want to pick up 3 key words that all 3 of you mentioned. The first one is personal, the second one is community, and the third is feedback. So again, Lulu said it's about everything now on myself, for myself, and by myself. But also from all 3 of your presentation, we can see it's really not that very sad all by myself thing. It's really more about I'm taking responsibility of my learning, but then we can really build this community, getting the help and feedback from not only the instructor, but your peer learners, but also your immediate environment. So for example, your parents, your neighbors, even your pet, as Lulu suggested. So I want to ask you, how is all your 3 experience of expanding this learning community that is not really restricted in the original class with your instructor and your other classmates, how you have seen any examples or anything you have witnessed of now you're able to connect something in your immediate environment and connect that back to your online learning environment. Yeah, and if you can start, if you're ready.
Maudie, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure. I think, as I mentioned, I've bounced around a bit during this online learning period. Started in my hometown in New York, and now I'm in Shanghai. I think for me, the most obvious application of expanding my learning community is that I've lived with a host family. So every day, many hours of the day, I get the opportunity to practice my Chinese. So I'll, when I had Chinese class, I would try to use a new Chengyu that I learned in a conversation with my host parents at dinner, or because we have a TV, I would turn on the news and I would realize, oh, that's something I just learned about in my class, and now they're bringing it up on the news. So living with a host family as opposed to in a dormitory, that was definitely one of the silver linings, that I got to interact with what I was learning in the class every day.
Thank you. Lulu, do you want to comment on that? Do you have a live or non-live pet you stay with, like your ukulele with your learning?
So definitely in my own department or my major, we do have this student leading group that will actually host or organize this online happy hour every other week, and then sometimes I would help design the poster for the event, and we just basically we just share what has happened, what is being really stressful, for everybody during the pandemic time. And then we would sort of thinking of how does all these experience shape us and transform us as a lifelong learner or something like that. And actually, I just hosted a workshop in our department. It's called the ice cream sharing workshop. So basically, we'll ask everybody in our department to bring an ice cream at their favorite, and they're just going to eat their ice cream in front of the camera, and the other person would describe the person who was eating the ice cream, and then trying to say, oh, I think the way you eat your ice cream indicate you're such type of personality, something like that. And that was pretty fun. And for me, myself, besides this kind of department-oriented learning community, my own sort of learning community, of course, is the Bilibili, which I love the most. It's a you know, the Damuku intense video uploading sort of sharing community, and I just like learned tons of things there. Just by reading the Damuku, you will always find something you're missing from the video itself. So that's my part.
Yeah, Tim, do you want to add anything?
Yes, actually, I want to share one website, which is the IMA show this semester. And I think it's a great example of how this online opportunity actually bring together a broader community of creative designers. Actually, this year's IMA show, which is really an offline show, is turned into online, and it combines the projects from both Shanghai, New York, and Abu Dhabi. So I think I'm really lucky to be able to see all the projects from around the world, and this is actually a great learning experience.
Okay, thank you. So for all the attendees, you can actually now interact with us through the chat box or the Q&A. I'll now hand over to Alex. Do you have any comment on hearing today's wonderful talks? Alex, can you hear us?
Yeah, I thought it was wonderful to hear everybody's perspective. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? It's wonderful to hear all of these lived experiences, and particularly how you were talking about, you all found very interesting creative ways of mediating your own experience and expression, whether it was through poetry in a second language, then it was songwriting in a second language from Lulu, and then Tim kind of breaking it from that personal creative experience and negotiating to a co-constructed mediation, where you were working and you're creating these presentations and bringing creativity to that, perhaps in ways or in classes where you might not have normally had that kind of project because you had to be online and working together with the digital tools. There were more opportunities to personalize and bring that forward. So I loved seeing those themes come out, and hearing you all really discuss how the creative expressions that you had been working on in the course of the semester are going to be impacting and moving forward. If with Maudie, you'll be continuing, you've unlocked new ideas and new confidence around expressing yourself with poetry, and Lulu, your songwriting keeps getting better and better, and I know you're gonna keep pushing that forward. And I'm curious for you, Tim, with this, like, you know, going into your field, as you've, you know, now worked around a bit with these creative tools, and that, you know, I'm curious if you've thought a bit about how you might bring some of these creative expressions that you and your classmates have, you know, taken advantage of and played with this semester into your future work.
Thank you, Alex. I think I also see one question in the chat box talking about asynchronous aspect of those tools. So I guess what I really liked about the current aspect is those tools have these functions built in, and they are very clean to use. But as a data science major and also heavy into IMA, I wish in the future I could build some kind of tools that are more close to what we see in the social media and on Bilibili, where we have the really fashionable and like state-of-the-art interactions for the learning settings, while we can still think about how can we make sure this is not going to be too recreational, but not serious enough for people to learn. So I guess finding a way to really combine all those interesting interactions while still making sure the learning experience is valid is truly what I want to explore more.
Great. Yeah, there were comments in the chat from Kevin and Adam around that, so that's great. And there was one point in there where there was a distinction between, you know, is it asynchronous or is it delayed feedback in working in that? So I'm curious whether you think there's maybe some different creative approaches for each of these, whether it's truly asynchronous or not in time, or whether the delay actually offers some affordances and things that you might design around.
Yes, I think this is actually a really great question. And I guess also Yanyue and I were also working on one of the projects to analyze our teachers thinking about their own teaching style, whether they want to choose asynchronous or synchronous, and for what reasons. And I do believe this really depends on the content of the course, whether it is a course that requires real-time feedback in order to connect all the dots and making this meaningful discussion, or it should be more self-paced and based on after-course discussions. So I guess this is an open question that the teachers and students can work out together. I don't know if Lulu and Maudie agree on this.
I would definitely echo that. I think that, for example, for a second language class like Chinese, it's so vital to have that, or at least to mimic that kind of FaceTime interaction where you do get the immediate feedback, because, you know, if you pronounce something wrong and within the next second, the teacher can remind you, oh, it's this pronunciation. I think that's really a vital component. Whereas, for example, my legal psychology course combined pre-recorded lectures and live meetings. And I think that for the purpose of the professor, you know, delivering the lecture part of it, the pre-recorded section was quite time efficient and effective, because we could watch it anytime. We could stop and take a pause and take notes and rewind if we needed to, you know, check a concept again. And then we still had the synchronous part, the Zoom meeting, to discuss and further expand on those topics from the pre-recorded lecture.
And I will say that both synchronized and asynchronized feedback are all important. The synchronized one is more like when there's so much nonverbal communication that's actually going on, and which sort of would send immediately feeling to the you know, either the instructor or the students. But then the asynchronized is more like you will have your own time, and after self-reflection or your instructor reading your paper and really thinking to it. And I will say probably that kind of feedback did have relatively more in-depth thoughts, because one of the course I was taking called Sustainability and Social Work, it does have the both synchronized and asynchronized part. The asynchronized is like the question that the professor will post it to. For the asynchronized part, it's more likely you would better in a more sort of self-reflective time and then really get into the material, whereas the synchronized one is more focused on the interaction between the classmate and discussion after you did read in depth of the reading material, and then like for everyone to inspire and come up with new thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, that's great. That makes me think a little bit around, you know, like in teaching in general, we've always had a balance in some ways of synchronous presentation, synchronous question and answer, synchronous discussion, and then asynchronous paper grading, and other kind of asynchronous, you know, chats with your friends and study sessions. So from wearing my teacher education hat and thinking about it from an education point of view, it seems that one of the byproducts of this moving online, and that is actually highlighting all of the different types of teaching and learning that normally happen, but now because they're having to be mediated by technology and time in such a different way, we're being called into that. And I'm curious whether any of the three of you have any thoughts about, you know, you might not be thinking of yourself as a teacher, but as you move forward in your professional life, how you might organize a situation knowing these things and having experienced this, how you might think about designing and facilitating experiences for others in the future as a result.
So I'm in the psychology field and hoping to do clinical work in the future, but this whole situation of, you know, virtually everything being online, from study sessions with friends to birthday parties with my grandpa, it's got me thinking about what's possible in the world of clinical psych in terms of online work. So I've just recently started working on a project with a professor to try and design a chatbot to provide psychoeducation resources to parents in a way that is interactive and user-friendly, but also evidence-based and you know, empirically supported. So I think if it weren't for this situation, we might not have thought about approaching that kind of work from a chatbot perspective. But given the ubiquity of that kind of thing now, it seems like almost an obvious next step for that kind of work. So it's definitely influenced me in that regard.
Great example. Tim or Lulu, any thoughts?
So I think from my side, probably if I were to design a class for some future online learning settings, I will try to make use of the data that is generated through the process. Because one of the things that we don't quite know oftentimes in the education setting is what the student want to know and how they are learning. But if we're turning all these things online, the data that are generated as a side product is very valuable for us to design a creative learning experience for the students. So for example, if we are designing a website, which sports are people clicking and which part of the website is getting used the most, or during a lecture, when we are using which kind of teaching methods, the students have the most participation or engagement. These kind of things can all be captured online. Although we do need to think about the data ethics and how we can protect the privacy of students. But if we can find a way to utilize that data, that will be helpful for us to really improve the teaching and learning efficiency.
Thank you. Since we don't have any other questions, do we have the link for retrieving recorded webinar? Yes. So you can scan this link, and if Alex, you have the YouTube playlist, you can also share it in our chat box. So now we want to really close today's webinar since it's already late. So I just want to say thank you to our three emerging talents. And I can see you already have a lot of future projects in your mind that you want to work on. A lot of students now hear that we were moving online. They're like similar to what you have felt before. They're like uncertain, they're confused. They thought it would be usually poorer than the face-to-face, but you have shown this very authentic and self-reflective story to show the power and potential of online learning. And before we end, and again, we want to say this is a bi-weekly session. So in 2 weeks' time, we will have a theme focused on community-based programs. And also today, brainstorming with Lulu, I just have this impromptu idea of we can use this platform of creative learning webinar to create something together. So maybe we'll also think about doing a session where everyone, so all the attendees, you're not just listening and typing, so everyone can contribute any form of creative expression, whether it's through visual or through audio, music, poems, everything. So we will think about how to actually arrange this. And If you follow our updates, we would love to invite everyone to actually join us in this creative gala, as I kind of call it now. And also we want to call attention to, in the future, we are calling for presenters. So if you're interested in creative learning, whether you are a student or teacher or parent or practitioner, anyone who is involved in creative learning are welcome to join us. You can self-nominate or nominate any friends you know to join our webinar series. So thank you again for joining us on a Saturday evening here in China, and thank Lulu for joining us from New York. Thank you all. Thank you and good night, Alex.
Thanks, everyone.